inside the goddamn chamber. A dozen or more technicians turned toward Meinkewitz. At the system's console, Patch pushed buttons and got new readings as he studied the monitors. Ray, we're not powered up. I bet you triggered the overload breakers in the Alpha computer. It could take hours to determine that, said Meinkewitz. Then I suggest we start. I'm going under the consoles to the Alpha readout. That's insane. More explosions, closer now, violently shook the control room. And I suggest if this doesn't power up in 5 minutes, we abort power up and take the escape transit into the valley. Patch shoved himself away from the console, then stomped across the room. He slid under an array of colored lights behind the main power-up console. He pulled at the bottom panel clip, just under the counter, finally forcing the panel to crash onto the floor. A long tube led to the junction linkage of the Alpha computer. Meinkewitz yelled from the outside as Patch crawled into the circuit tube's blue glow. The Alpha junction door, embedded in the right side of the tube, paralleled a series of cooling fans. He ripped off the door and tossed it across the tube. Red digits on the readout screen revealed a power drop and the severing of computer and SEC-9 power lines on the southern side of Sector 13. He called back through the muffled passageway. Ray, get me some monitoring equipment so I can reroute the power. No response. Ray, come on. Patch slid the inner door to the right and manually traced the power outage to a line near the outside security doors. He typed in the secondary route to a power input via the SEC-11 lines to the north. Almost instantaneously, the numbers stabilized. Meinkewitz could now activate the power-up. Patch did not bother with the Alpha panel and crept on his back up the tube to the LCA opening. Ray, power up, Ray, power up! With 2 automatic rifles pointed at his head, he backed out of the tube. He sat up in the brighter light and his stomach wrenched. 3 men in olive green uniforms controlled the booth and had shot at least a dozen Sector 13 personnel. A pug-nosed Latin man with peppered hair strutted his large frame into the room. He had ammo belts crossed over his chest, wet dusty black boots and an automatic weapon. Beard stubble covered his pudgy face and his dark eyes focused on Patch. Who the hell are you? Asked Patch. You don't question us, he said in a deep Spanish accent. What do you want? Asked Meinkewitz. This place has nothing for you. An older, sandy-haired soldier with deep smile lines etched over his oval face had either a German or Russian accent and walked across the booth, waving 2 pistols in his large hands. We have secured the entire complex, Carlos. We have known about this place for 6 months. What are you doing here? Asked Carlos. Meinkewitz turned in his chair slightly. It's a particle accelerator. You are a fucking liar, mister. Haven't you ever heard of quantum physics? Viva told you are launching weapons across space and time. You have no right to be in here, shouted one of the technicians as he stepped toward Carlos. Carlos smiled and fired his weapon once, ripping apart the kid's head and his body bounced off the console. You no-good son of a bitch, shouted Meinkewitz as he stood. Is that what I am? I know who you are, said Meinkewitz. Patch eyed the blinking red light on the panel for the power-up. You're wasting your time here. Carlos smiled as he marched up to Meinkewitz and slowly pushed the weapon barrel against his skull. You don't tell me what to do. One of the technicians began moving toward Carlos, but the other soldier shot him several times with the pistol. The technician slid on his stomach and then Carlos shot him in the back. Patch edged closer to the power-up button. You destroyed the country, you bastards, shouted Meinkewitz. We have nothing left. I don't like you, said Carlos. He fired at Menkiewicz's chest, throwing his body back in the chair. Blood oozed through his white shirt and he showed no movement. Patch glanced at Meinkewitz and then at Carlos. You might as well kill me while you can. You will be debriefed, you wise ass. Carlos pushed Menkiewicz's limp body onto the bloody floor. I need you to help me. Patch stared at the dead technicians, but he saw the red light flashing in his peripheral vision. In order to travel back in time, the power-up process needed to commence. Kate was still down there, If he could send her back, even without the briefcase, her resourcefulness would guide her to the Meinkewitz of the past. I have to shut down this place before we're all killed. Carlos's unshaven face and piercing coal eyes remained only a few inches away from Patch. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand. Because if I don't stop the overload, this place is going to blow sky high. This is a classified installation. Missile defense, lied Patch. This place is powered by a nuclear reactor that's about to melt down. You need to let me fix this. Why should I believe you? Do you really want to run the risk of being wrong, Carlos? Carlos stopped and motioned with one of his guns. You do what you have to do, but if you do anything against us, you will be executed. Understood. Patch sidestepped the lifeless Meinkewitz. His stomach jolted when he inadvertently stepped in Menkiewicz's blood. He leaned over the console and simply set the power-up sequence back in place. The power-up systems quickly cranked, shaking the booth. He wondered whether Meinkewitz had already set the power burst into the chamber. On the smaller timer, in the lower portion of the screen, the orange digits indicated Kate would be catapulted back in time in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. The officer pulled at Patch's sleeve and passed the gun onto his cheek. Who are you? Patch pushed his lips together and stared at his captor. Captain Robert G. Kincaid. I work here. The chamber brightened green. What's happening down there? It sounds louder now. I don't want any tricks. It's winding down. It'll glow for a few minutes and then shut off. Another soldier appeared in the door. The upper area is secure. Good, said Carlos. He turned toward Patch. You had better not be lying. We have an overload situation up here. In 1 minute and 11 seconds, the chamber would dilate, sending Kate back in time. Carlos seemed confused. This is suspicious. It's not working. You people made me wait too long. The chamber is going to blow. This whole place will be destroyed unless I deactivate it from the inside. Carlos looked down toward the chamber and then faced Patch. Deactivate! Deactivate! Patch ran from the booth, but the soldiers followed him into the stairwell. He questioned whether he could enter the chamber before power-up. With their weapons held upright, Carlos and Eric trailed him from the stairwell toward the chamber. As the concrete rocked with the power-up, Patch sprinted toward the chamber. He turned abruptly and motioned his hands toward the floor. Everybody down! Down! Carlos and the others leaped to the floor as Patch reached the chamber and entered the security numbers. The door loosened slightly as a massive rush of steam and wind pushed outside. He fought the onslaught and slipped into the swirling mass. The hatch slammed shut. Someone pounded from the outside of the hatch. Patch turned and sprinted into the brightening fog. Maybe Kate had leaped into the displacement. Carlos Sánchez called his name through the speakers. Kincaid! Kincaid! Patch did not see Kate as he jogged down the gritty walkway. He knew what would happen ahead. Hesitation would get him killed. Meinkewitz would have told him to go forward. For a third time, Patch Kincaid disappeared into the time dilation field's shifting nebulous gases. He no longer heard the taunting terrorist as he continued to call for Kate within the clouds. Kate! 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 Without the briefcase, his story would be challenged. He soon sensed movement and weightlessness within the timeless morass. Minus food and water, he could die, and he worried about Kate's pathway back in time. Yet explaining everything to the Meinkewitz of 2 weeks ago with no proof presented a major problem. And what of Korbinski's self-consistency principle and the dual identities for both Kate and himself in this time period? What if nobody believed him and he could not change time? History would then play out, again annihilating United States cities. Crackpots told intelligence agencies wild stories all the time. He would find himself dead if they questioned his story. And what if he and Kate had traveled alternate routes back into the past? It might be impossible to find her unless she went right to Meinkewitz. The fog whipped around him, varying in shades of gray and complete darkness. He spun into a slow, weightless tumble, and once again began his journey back in time. Chapter 7. Northern Hemisphere. Winter. Late morning. Location unknown. Cold air brought him to consciousness, like a slowly developing photograph inside a shaded barrier. Moistened maple leaves, bordered by a foot of snow, melted at the edges, gradually surrounded him. The area remained shaded as the energy slowly diminished and the bubble barrier separated him from the outside world. At first he felt the cold breeze. Hardwood trees, branches bare to the blue sky, followed a rock-strewn slope to the adjacent ridges. Water droplets dripped from the branches. A squirrel quickly scurried up a maple, dove off the upper branches and soared to a neighboring tree. Several blue jays darted through the winter air as a flock of geese formed an arrow-shaped formation over a distant ice-covered pond. He stood and cupped his hands. His voice echoed down the slope toward the hills beyond. "Kate! Kate!" Alone in the forest with an occasional windburst, sometimes moving through the frozen boughs and branches, his exact location remained obscure, but hope beckoned with a dissipating campfire or chimney smoke meandering through the forest. He zipped his camouflage jacket and started down the snow-hardened slope. "Kate! Kate!" He reached an ice-caked stream where the slopes converged and placed his boot on the slick rocks. The stream, like time itself, narrowly cascaded over the smooth rocks, golden in the winter light. Smoke, now heavier in the clean air, lured him forward as he carefully tiptoed over the slippery boulders to the far riverbank. Kate's location eluded him as the hours dragged on with no sign of a trail in the pristine snow. At worst, she might not have survived the embarking chamber. He balanced like a gymnast along the angled slope. His ears stung as he now placed his hands under his warmer armpits and followed the smoke scent. He scurried toward the ridges ahead. At midday, the sunlight pushed through the evergreen branches, and the hill shadows darkened the stream. The creek wound into a brighter forested canyon ahead. When he climbed onto the thin rock ledge, he gazed at the water cascading toward a rolling plain. Beyond the plain, the snow-sprinkled mountains rimmed the horizon. He paralleled a weathered rock between the hardwoods. The ground slowly leveled into a field with yellow-cut corn stalks stuck solid in the snow. Like he had in high school track, Patch hurdled the next stone wall and landed in the field. A singular white plume from a long shed billowed into the cloudless air at the far end of the field. His boots crunched the snow as he marched toward the shed. With each stride, his thoughts centered on Kate in retrograde. Near the edge of the field, the silver maple trees, spiked with metal spigots, dipped infinitesimal droplets into hanging galvanized buckets. A white farmhouse and a weathered wood barn rose like the morning sun behind the elongated wood shed. Steam burst out the rear windows and dissipated into the cold air as men in denim overalls scurried in and out of the shed. Along the muddy yard, one of the men removed a tool from a shiny cherry-red Dodge pickup and then proceeded into the shed. In his military fatigues and terrain jacket, Patch trudged across the matted snow. Smoke gushed out the shed's black stovepipe and settled across the yard. Through the shed's open doors, the steam ascended from the long metal vats, and a rich maple odor inundated the air. A lanky man, about his age, in a red plaid shirt, looked up from the vat. He wiped his forehead with a navy handkerchief and walked outside. "You all right, mister?" "I think so." He extended his warm, firm hand. "Hey, Wilton Jeffries." Patch spoke quickly. "Captain Robert Kincaid." "Captain!" Jeffries guided him into the moist, warm air. Your plane crash or something, Captain?" "We were on a training flight last night. I got my signals crossed and bailed out, Mr. Jeffries. I need to get to my unit." "Well, damn." "I landed in the hills. I estimated 50 miles from the drop-off point," said Patch, pointing across the field. "I've been outside for 4 or 5 hours." "Well, you're damn lucky you weren't out there during the nor'easter." "You have a phone?" "Sure. Must be looking for you by now, Captain." "Maybe." Jeffries motioned him forward.